So I'm an educator. I taught for many years at Notre Dame Academy in Worcester.
So he's filming.
Oh, okay. So I can't move. Oh, yeah, okay.
He's gonna follow you.
So I taught for many years, and in my retirement age, I still wanted to be a teacher. And about 5 years ago, Rick Mansfield, who otherwise ended up with a funeral today, decided that post-COVID, we were understanding that our culture had become very death-phobic and very grief illiterate, and moving away from formal ritual because we couldn't have it during COVID. I mean, there were so many restrictions on gathering. So he decided to hire me as a community educator to basically help people become less phobic about death and more grief literate in terms of how to support people who are grieving, how to grieve well yourself. So he hired me 5 years ago, so I've been working for him for 5 years. Amber, on the other hand, has a very long history with Miles Funeral Home and did her apprenticeship there over 30 years ago, which is hard to believe when you take a look at her. And she is our advanced planner. So she's certified in being able to help people figure out how to put together what they want. The topic today is about legacy and about how you want to be remembered and about the various ways that people can build and express and prepare for their legacy, not just their funeral. So we've become very good at passing on our valuables, and most people have a plan to pass on their valuables. But legacy is about passing on your values, not just your valuables. And there are many, many, many ways to do that. And we suggest that that be done as a gift to your family as you are pre-planning. Like I've pre-planned my funeral and the way that, I want things to happen because I'm single, never had any children, and I really don't want to leave it to my niece and nephew to have, it be a burden to them. So it made sense for me to do that. But I didn't really plan the legacy piece of it. I mean, how do I want to be remembered? I know how I want my funeral service to be, but I haven't made a plan for the other, and I've begun to work on that. So that's the topic for today. And then we'll have a Q&A, but if a question comes up at any time, I'm more than happy, as long as it's okay with Brendan, I'm more than happy to have people interrupt and ask either myself or Amber a question. Okay? So, want to say anything in the beginning?
Just that I am a funeral director and Miles' advanced planner. So that is my job at the funeral home, is to help people put their plans in place ahead of time so that it's not something you're leaving to your family. It's not something you're leaving to friends or whomever is in your life. On that table in the corner there, we have a few pamphlets on pre-planning. There's also a sign-up sheet. So if there is a need or a want for me to reach out to you to go over some pre-planning, there's a sign-up sheet over there for you to leave your name and a phone number and email, however you want to be contacted. Also some pamphlets over there on pre-planning for you to take. That's me. My business card is over there as well, so feel free, please, to take what you would like over there.
Perfect. And also on the table is a place where you can sign up for legacy items. So say you want some assistance writing your obituary or your eulogy or someone else's eulogy. So those legacy pieces, you can check the box off for those, and that's what I would assist with. If, in fact, there were enough people who wanted to do that as a group, we'd be happy to offer that as a group activity. Okay, so say a whole bunch of you want to write your own eulogy or your own. I have written my own obituary. It's done. It's Amber has it in my
Yep.
in my
File.
packet. It's
Yep.
finished again,
Yep.
right? Because really, who knows your story better than you? And that's really what we're talking about today. Your story. Every person is a unique individual expression of human life. And that expression has been a gift to people. One of the ways I'm starting to look at my legacy, and I've just started this, but I ended up with and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room, because I ended up with a lot of pictures, boxes and boxes and boxes of photographs. And I'm starting to try to downsize again so that my niece and nephew don't have to come in and clean out after me, right? So I looked at all these pictures and said, what am I going to do with these? And as I started to look at them, I saw people who meant so much to me, who taught me something, who impacted me in a way that changed me, right? So there's one person, she actually is a nun, and I worked in Africa with her, and her name is Sister Rita. And she knew me probably better than anybody has ever known me. Like, you want to get to know somebody, go to Africa and work in the trenches, right? And so she would look at me and she'd say, the problem with you is that you haven't learned to keep your mind where your body is. And then that would become her mantra when I would be like, I always have 20 things in my head at one time, right? So she would say, keep your mind where your body is. Keep your mind where your body is. After we came home from Africa, she died very suddenly of multiple myeloma, which we didn't even know she had. And her picture's in here, and the only thing it says is, keep your mind where your body is. And then this is an aunt of mine, and this is what I most loved about her. So sometimes it's a quote. Sometimes I haven't figured out what I'm doing yet with this person's story. But it's something that, this is one of my former bosses who was just she was the best boss I ever had. She knew how to get her team working. And that's an important influence on our life because we spend a lot of time at work, correct? So I'm hoping that this would be on the table at my memorial service or my visitation hours, my calling hours. And people could find themselves, or because we don't often tell each other enough often why we love each other, or why you impact my life the way you do, right? That my boss probably has no idea how much she impacted my life. But if she was there and she found herself and read that, so your legacy isn't only the things you've done. Your legacy is also who's made you who you are and who those people or experiences are. So if I would ask you at this point to just take a minute and think of one experience, just one, that really changed you. Something that changed you. And is that a story that needs to be told? And how should that story be told? And to whom should that story be told? That's your legacy. Because legacy is what's left when we leave this earth. When we leave this earth, the body's done. But that's the only thing that's done. And we don't love each other for our bodies, unless we're married. That's definitely part of it, right? But we love each other for what makes a person dream and have visions. We love each other for the things we do that change our attitude in the day. I live with such a wonderful person. I've lived with her for 52 years. We are like day and night, which is probably why we've been together 52 years, right? As she, never do I ever leave the house without her saying, good luck. Good luck this morning. Now, she She worked for county government, and she went to the same office for 42 years every day, and she did the same task every day for 42 years. Now, me, I've been a teacher, I've been a minister, I've been in Africa, right? My life is just very different than hers. The thought of her having to get up and talk to people, never mind a group called the Dull Men's Group, she could like never do it, right? But she never fails to appreciate that I'm going out and I've prepared to do something and I want to do a good job. And her good luck is it, and it always touches me because she's got a whole life going on, right? And then I come home and what do you think she does? How'd it go? How'd it go? And sometimes I just go, oh, it was great, and I move on. And sometimes I go, oh man, was it awful? And she's fine. So those daily things that are habits that, seem like they're nothing, they're everything. They're everything. Because if she should pass away tomorrow, the heartbreak for me would be every time I'm going out, there's nobody there to say good luck. Or when I come home, there's nobody there to say, how'd it go? So I listened to a podcast this morning, and it was Dudes and Dads is the name of the podcast. And it's two guys who are fathers. And their podcast is about learning to stop being like a married person and being a dad. Like, how do you really become a dad? And they did a podcast on legacy. And as a father, how do you build your legacy? And what are you building for your children? And it was actually quite good. But what they were expressing is the very things they're building to give their kids, like financial security and a home, land, the things that they always have thought, now are not the things they want to concentrate on. It's that when they die, they want their kids to say, my dad taught me to be kind. My dad was compassion incarnate, right? That's what they want to leave. So the process of doing that in conjunction with your planning your service or whatever is to say the service becomes a reflection of that person you are. And that's one good thing that's happened. When I was about 9 years old, the first time I ever went to a funeral was next door. And it was the lady next door. And I grew up in Sutton, and it was farm country at that point. And I would bring her mail in every day because she was shut in, she couldn't get out. And so she was a daily part of my life. I'd pick up the mail, I'd go in with the mail, I'd sit. She'd say, these books have to go to the library. She'd tell me all about the books she read. I would sit there for a half hour every day. Mrs. Holbrook. So Mrs. Holbrook died. The wake was going to be at home because that's the way it was done, right? So my mother was like, okay, tomorrow when you get home from school, you have to go set up the chairs for the wake. You have to bring over the food. You have to go over this one's house, get all this stuff that we had to do. My first wake was in a home. And it was a huge loss for me because it was a daily loss. Then the next time someone passed away that was close to me, it was in a funeral home, and it was very formal, and it was my uncle, and he had taken his own life, and he was a Catholic, and he could not be brought into the church, his body, and he also could not be buried in the family plot because it was in a Catholic cemetery. Okay, just showing you how old I am.
Because of the suicide?
Yes, because of the suicide. That was the law. This was like 1962, maybe? 61, 62. Things have changed, and that's the point I'm trying to make, okay? So we've kind of gone through all of these iterations of how do we express what is ritual to us, and how do we express the meaning of a life when the physical life is over. So in that particular circumstance, I ended up really very bitter because he could not be brought into the church, and we left his casket outside. And he had 6 children, and they had found his father hanging in the cellar when they came home from school one day. And as a kid, even 13 years old, I was like, how come they have to leave their daddy on the step? I mean, I literally could not move past that. How come their daddy's on the step? And then I grew a little older, and I really got very connected to church and did all the formal funerals, and worked for the Catholic Church and all of that. And it was very, very beautiful. It was the ritual was very beautiful because it was comforting for people, and it was part of their legacy to have been people of the church. So to come for their final place, to be in a church, to have a beautiful ritual, was what they worked towards all their life, correct? So that was very, very beautiful. Since COVID, and since we have become a less religious, more spiritual kind of culture, and younger people are not finding the expression of spirituality in formal religion as much as they did, like in my day, when I was their age or younger, people are less likely to be looking towards their final celebration of their life in a church. And then once COVID happened, and we couldn't, then it kind of, if you excuse the pun, nailed the final nail into the coffin. It's kind of like people are like, okay, I don't have to go to church. All right, people have, right? And so you see us moving towards direct cremation with no services. Now, I'm a minister. I'm an interfaith minister, and I really believe in ritual. And why do I believe in ritual? Because it does 2 things, particularly at the time of death. It honors a life. It honors a life. Life matters. Every life matters. Every life has its own beauty. I don't care how it has lived. I don't care what it's done. Every life has its own beauty, and that is to be honored. And ritual comforts those who are grieving. The ritual of having some kind of celebration, gathering, formal piece after someone dies helps those who are grieving to step into the grief because it's real. What we don't see and experience very often, we don't take in and process. So the act of going to visitation or calling hours or a service, a memorial, is very necessary for people who are grieving and who have experienced loss. And they also need something tangible, I have found, to walk away with, which remember the days, well, we still have them. They used to call them prayer cards. We call them tribute cards now. Often we'll have to pick a name of the name of the person and their picture, birth date, death date, and maybe a poem or something like that. Those have a real place. People walk away with those and remember. They remember. I have stacks of them.
I do too.
Yeah, I have stacks of them. And so what I do with my Christmas cards, here's another sense of connection. All of this is about connection and connection with people and living heart to heart with each other, right? Living meaningfully with each other. I still send Christmas cards, and I still get a big stack of them. I'm a believer in that, right? And so January 1st, I have all the Christmas cards that I have been sent, and I put them in a nice basket. And every day, I take one out. And that's the person that I offer my day for. That is the person that I say, today, whatever good I do, they're in it. So trying to keep the people precious to me present in my life. So legacy is being shaped all along, is the point I'm making. You don't all of a sudden have to look back and say, well, what have I done with my life? Well, what's it about? Well, you have lived. And you have had these experiences. So what's left when you're gone? Your legacy. It's your story. Miles is very good at personalizing people's celebrations. We really believe that you don't cookie cut funerals or visitation hours or celebrations of life. And that brings up the point that there's so many words out there right now, because as we shift from this religious to spiritual or formalized remembrance to less formalized, there's a lot of words being thrown out that we're not really defining. So people say, I want a memorial service. Now, if I asked 3 people right now to define what they think a memorial service is, I'd get 3 different answers, right? If I asked, what is a service? I would get 3 different. What is a celebration of life? If you go to church and you have a Catholic Mass, that's a celebration of someone's life. If you have a visitation hour or 2 at the funeral home or any other place without a formalized ritual, there is still ritualization, and it is a celebration of someone's life. The Irish do it all the time at home, right? So this sense of what are we talking about? Well, I just want to go through this. So you have church-sponsored or church-related services. Pretty much the ritual is defined. Each church has what it calls, the Jewish ritual is the Jewish ritual is the Jewish ritual. You don't write it over, okay? Whether or not you can personalize a church service is dependent on the denomination and the minister or rabbi or priest. It just is. Celebration, you can have a celebration of life in a funeral home with only visitation, so no service. You could have a celebration or a memorial service without visitation in the funeral home. You can have an hour of visitation and then a celebration, some formal kind of ritual. That's what I'm having, right? Then you can have a celebration of life at home or a public venue like the Beechwood Hotel. So I'm doing one this coming Saturday. And this was a very prominent person from Washington, D.C., who used to be my neighbor. And this is what they're doing, which is perfect for them. And for him, it really, truly expresses him. They're doing a private family burial at 10 o'clock in the morning for just the immediate family. And then at 11:30, there is a ritual that is what I would call a service. It has all the marks of a service gathering at the Beechwood, and then a meal. Meal is really something that has become a huge component in these celebrations or memorials because they've always been about a ritual, right? What is the Catholic Mass? It's a meal, right? There's the whole sense of meal and gathering around the table is camaraderie and expression and family and all of those things. Now, I once worked with a person who was passing away, and he wanted to have a celebration in the funeral home. He wasn't a churchgoer, and he said, I want a ritual. And I'd like a couple of Bible readings, and I'd like, a couple of songs, and just put something together and do it. He passed away, and his children said, Dad loved Arby's. We're going to Arby's Wednesday night to have dinner on Dad. If you want to come, you can come. But we are not doing anything in the funeral, and there will be no ritual there. So, and that's a sign of the times as well, is that when we don't talk and find common ground about how we want to be remembered, how we want to be celebrated, what is the meaning of our life once the physical part is over, then whoever is your next of kin, and Amber can vouch for this, they're in charge. Even if a minister says, your dad said he really would like, too bad we're not doing it. So the idea of pre-planning for, and really that's Amber's topic, that's not my topic, but there's two values to it that I can see that are just invaluable. And number one is that you get what you want. You get what you want. Number two, it's a gift to your family to have it done. Because particularly when a child loses a parent, and I don't care how old they are, their parent can be 90 and they can be 60. It's so hard to lose your parent. I'm sure you've all experienced it already. And why? Because our parents were the first person who knew us, and they are the first persons we knew. So there is no other relationship like it. And so when we have to go and make arrangements for them, it's really painful. It brings up pain. And unfortunately, what I see happening in the culture is we want to avoid the pain. So we do the quickest, easiest thing, cremation. Direct cremation, that's it, thank you. We're not doing anything. And pain is hard. Nobody likes it, let's face it. It's, but right now, do you know that there is a 2.5 to 3 year wait to get a grief counselor? And do you know why? Because it's the post-COVID time when all these people who didn't do any ritual, didn't step into their grief, now they're facing all this grief, and they don't know how to do it. So they're looking for grief counselors, and they can't find them. So to me, that's the biggest reason that we need to look and say, wait a minute, why does it matter that we do something? Why does ritual matter? And what does ritual do for the griever? Okay. So while the setting might be vastly different, or the rituals might be vastly different, all of those options that I just talked about, they offer community and a communal way to start the personal healing. So the gift that you're really giving your family when you make the choice is a future gift that they probably don't even know you now that you're giving them. Right, Amber? Mm-hmm. And Amber is really, really good at that. She's very, very good. She was the pre-planner for me. And I wasn't easy because I wanted a rich.
You were easy because you knew exactly what you wanted.
Okay, so I was easy because I knew what I wanted. Yeah. But I wanted, the lilac farm, and I wanted, I was kind of, I wasn't traditional, let's say that, right? So she had more work to put it all together, to call the lilac farm and say, how much do you charge? And to kind of help me put that all together. It's kind of like, and I don't know how you feel about this, Amber, but I don't like the notion that people say, Well, you're like a wedding planner. I don't,
or an event planner.
or an event planner.
Yeah.
Because there
It's
is,
a wedding. You're
Yeah,
having a wedding.
well-
You're going
yeah, and,
heaven.
I mean, it is an event that should be planned. Absolutely, absolutely. And given on your own perspective of spirituality and the afterlife and all that, yes, in fact, it could be a wedding you're going to.
entering the heavenly gates.
Yeah, well, I mean, but the thing is, if we don't plan it, we're also not coming to grips with our own mortality. Look at our ages, except her, she's young. But look at her, and you're you're young. Yeah, amen. You're right. She could. No, but you understand. We start to think about that at this stage of our life, and that we are not immortal.
So say you start planning this thing, like how often you people change it, okay? Yesterday I said that, today's different.
That's an excellent question, because what did I planned maybe 2.5 years ago with her, and I am about to say to her, I've got some changes, right?
Yep.
So how often? That's a great question. How often?
I have some families who schedule a yearly conversation with me because things have changed. Their notion of what they wanted has changed. They have new great grandchildren, whatever has happened that's changed, or just a completely different idea of what they want. So I do always tell people this is I wouldn't say a work in progress, but there's definitely room for change.
So when you have to make a change,
Just-
you send them a bill, okay? Do they need to pay you again if they
Why-
want to make a change?
Why would there be a bill?
I don't know, I'm just wondering.
No,
if-
sitting with me
No.
is not, there is no financial obligation whatsoever. Obviously, there's a benefit to pre-funding a funeral, which is to alleviate that burden on family members, but there's never a requirement to pay for any services like that. Obviously, if you're,
good to know.
obviously, if you choose cremation and then you say, oh, no, and you've already paid for cremation, now you say, oh, I want a traditional service, there may be obviously an additional charge, but you don't ever have to pay
Well,
that
that's
at
good
that
to know,
time.
because
Yeah.
people will be reluctant to
Sure.
come to you
Sure.
or
Yeah.
make
Yep.
changes
Yep.
if they know that they're going to have to write a check.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Well,
never
and
obligation.
I do want to, I'm so glad you said that, because I do want to make it very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Pre-planning does not mean you must prepay.
Right. Not at all.
Pre-planning is figuring out what you want to happen. Paying is paying for it. Okay, and you may or may not want to do the second. Okay, I did, because again, I don't want, my niece that really is going to be the one to put it all together lives in Scotland. So it's going to take a little bit for her to get here, right? So when I met with Amber, I not only paid for it, but I signed my cremation papers, because the funeral home can't do, if you're being cremated, they can't do anything until your next of kin signs your papers, and she's got to get here. So I'm going to do it now. It's signed.
Right.
So it's, but you don't have to pay for it. So thank you for asking that question.
Great question. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really was. So there are some what we call legacy pieces associated with your death that, in fact, tell your story of who you are. And so one of them is very, very old. It goes back 3,000 years or more to a guy by the name of Jacob in the Bible, who had 12 sons, and there was a disagreement about who is getting what. You know that Bible story? And he's on his deathbed, and he's like, yeah, well, it's supposed to be you, but it's not going to be, it's going to be you. And right? And so the Jewish tradition calls that an ethical letter. They call it an ethical letter, and they have them, and they do them, and they've had that tradition forever. An ethical will, an ethical letter. So that's a legacy. An ethical will might be something you did with your lawyer, and it goes with your will, and in it, those people who are getting a bequest in your will get read this letter. Okay, so that's an ethical will. A legacy letter is something you write or someone helps you write that really has a specific purpose. Like, I want to tell my children that I'm very sorry that I left the family, and I wrote one for a dad who divorced his wife and knew the pain that his kids felt because he no longer lived in the house, and knew that they were too young to understand, but that someday he might be gone and they might be old enough to understand. So he wrote a letter. And that letter explained that A, he loved them, B, he made a choice he had to make at the moment, C, I'm very sorry for what that choice has meant for you. I never meant to hurt you. And, that's an example of a legacy letter. I did one recently for a family that's experiencing their first grandchild. So the first baby is being born into the family. And what they wanted to express was, this is who our family is, this is what we've been, this is what we feel about you coming into this family, and the excitement. And see, if you have grandchildren, you know that by the time they're 10 or 11 or 12 or 20 or 30, you might even yourself forget the excitement of what it was for that child to be being born. So to capture that moment of, you're coming to the world, you're our first grandchild, oh, we're so excited. So I wrote, as a legacy writer, so my undergrad degree is in technical writing, so I've been a writer all my life. And so when I wrote that piece for them, it was in their, because they told me everything, right? It was in their language and the way they would welcome this child. And they're giving it to their son and daughter-in-law at the baptism of the baby as a gift. I found one online today that is a legacy letter someone wrote to her children on Valentine's Day to say, I love you. Which, again, is a beautiful thing. And that's what she gave her children for Valentine's Day. As a matter of fact, I have it. Let me read it to you. Because it's one thing to say, this is what it might sound like. But she said, Gandalf, who I don't know who that is, said, some believe that it's only great power that can hold evil in check. But that's not what I have found. I have found it's in the small things, everyday deeds by ordinary folks that keep the darkness at bay. I've tried my best to do Gandalf proud, to notice others, to appreciate the small things in life, to take time to do ordinary things. I never won a Pulitzer Prize, and our home certainly didn't win any decorating awards. But my trusty old sandals got their share of weird looks because I've lived a lot of years. And then she goes on, and then she starts with her advice. Buy that bouquet of flowers. Show up even when it's hard. Raise the cover on the piano keys and play a tune to brighten someone's day. Let someone go ahead of you at the grocery store. You're not in that much of a hurry. Laugh. Sing. Give the dog at the park a scratch behind the ears. Do the small everyday deeds because they're the ones that matter. And then she goes on, and then she says, and finally, it's been my greatest joy by far to walk alongside you through this life. Andrew, and to raise the two beautiful, Andrew, that's her son, and to raise two beautiful children together. You've been my greatest ally and defender, the biggest cheese ball I've ever known. I love you to infinity and beyond. Tony and Amanda, I'm so proud of you and honored to have been your mom. I hope you continue to grab hold of life and experience every beautiful thing this world has to offer. Trust your guts. It won't steer you wrong. Wear the darn sandals. You're my people, and I'm grateful for the time we had together. Keep on shining brightly. I'm convinced you're the ones who will keep the darknesses at bay. Love, Mom. So imagine being this woman's child and getting that all wrapped up as a Valentine's Day gift. So the problem with asking the question about what would my legacy be, or what do I want my legacy to be, is that we often think about that moment of death. And the question of what's going to be left after I'm gone is actually the question. But living in the now, you are creating the legacy. You are the legacy. Now is the legacy. Right? And that's the very best reason that I can give you for pre-planning and figuring out what you want for service, how you want to express who you are, and what you want to give to those left behind. That is the very best reason. And having done it myself, it's huge. It's a huge relief off my mind to know that when I'm gone, my niece from Scotland already has a copy of everything Amber has, and everything's in my strong box. I still have one of those metal strong boxes, right? And everything's in there. Just go, pick it out, and oh, yes, here's what you paid for at Miles. Here's who she dealt with. Here's, it's just like going to make, because when we die, people are upset. They're hurting. They're tired. Especially if, we die after being, after like 2 weeks in a hospital after a stroke. And somebody's been coming to the hospital every day, and they're so exhausted, now they've got to go. They're exhausted, right? They're sad. They're confused. They've got their own life to live. They probably have 2 kids at home that want them. And now they have to go in and sit. And so many times, now as a minister, I do funerals for moms as well. That's the other thing I do. When I sit with a family and say, how can I help you? Tell me about your mom. And I'll just listen before I ask the question. What are you thinking you'd like to do to celebrate her life? Usually, they've already decided they want a formal celebration, which is why Miles has me. They call me. So usually that's kind of figured out. But still, to let people say, what do you want? And then the thing that surprises me the most is, as a minister, I don't want to offend anybody. So if someone did not believe in a life after, I don't want to be up there saying they're going to heaven. Now they're the bride in heaven or whatever, right? So I always ask the question, what did your mom or your dad or whomever believe about the afterlife? 99% of the time, do you know what they say? I don't know. We never talked about it. And then I have to say, is it okay then to make allusions to heaven or nirvana or or what are we going to do here? The rest of the time, in that other 1%, they say, she believed in heaven. Okay, what does that mean? So, having the talk is really important. Where are my little cards? Right here. I'm sorry, sir. The National Funeral Director Association has created this really cool little program. They're cards, like a deck of cards. And it's have the talk of a lifetime. And it's talking about not your death, your life. Talking about your life. And getting to know. And, it sounds strange that sometimes we need a tool to help us talk about our own life, but we do. Because the spectrum is, I don't want to talk about myself because I seem like an egomaniac, all the way over to, I don't want to talk about myself, there's nothing to say. Right? and every iteration in between. So I really highly recommend these. They're fun. And I wish I had a set to give away. I'm going to get a bunch, and every time I go out to talk,
a good idea.
I'm going to
Leave
give.
them.
I did bring a giveaway, though. Anybody got a birthday around June 28th? June 28th, which is in a couple of weeks. What's the nearest to June 28th? No June birthdays? July. When? July what?
No, May.
Oh, May. Okay, May what?
27.
May 27th. Anybody between May 27th and June 28th? There you go. You know what she does. It's just cute little sayings about life. And there's one a day, just one of those things you open up and read a sentence or two. Okay, so legacy letters, I gave you an example. Obituaries are an example of a legacy item, writing your obituary. Several years ago, this was a long time ago, I picked up the newspaper and I read an obituary, and it was in the first person. The deceased had written it. And she was a young woman who died of cancer, and I taught her daughter at Notre Dame Academy. So I knew the woman. And I didn't even know she was sick. But she wrote this very, very beautiful obituary. You know, I was born on this day. My parents were. So the traditional notification things were in there. But they were her telling her story. And then I'm leaving my children. It breaks my heart to see them go. But what a blessing they've been to me in my illness. And I thank them. And then at the end, she wrote, to everyone who loved me, supported me, and made me the person I am, I say thank you. It's beautiful. And then it was, please come and celebrate me with my family on, and she gave the details of her funeral. I mean, it's beautiful. So an obituary doesn't have to, and you're seeing, right, Emma? We're seeing people open up those possibilities
Absolutely.
now.
Yep.
And the style. It can be a poem. It does not need to be a narrative, right? Mm-hmm. It can be a letter. There can be so many, many things. And I think COVID really did help us to say the traditional ways of doing things didn't happen, and we had people did have to go to Abby's and celebrate, right? They did. I mean, we couldn't, or they had to, have a small little thing at home or something. But the thing is, what is right for your life? What is right for your life? A eulogy weaves together the history, the memories, the anecdotal stories, the personality traits of the person, and again, the values telling us who they are. This celebration that I'm doing coming Saturday, there are 3 eulogies. And one of them focuses on Matt's work. And he was he was a fundraiser for nonprofits in government, so governmental NGOs. And the last thing he was working on was Medicaid and keeping Medicaid alive. And the woman that wrote about his work life started working with him when they were in their 20s. He was 57 years old, and when he passed. And she talked about how they worked at the Women League of Voters, and it was all women and Matt, and what she got from seeing somebody choose a job where he was not the typical person in the job, and then they followed each other's career. She told that story beautifully, and she told it in a way with things that his family did not know and could not tell. a friend of mine died probably 5 years ago now, and his son wrote the eulogy, and they actually passed it out at the calling hours the night before because they knew a lot of people. This guy was a school teacher, and they knew a lot of the students would not be able to come out of school and go to the funeral. They literally passed it out before it was delivered in the service. Because that's your story. So that's passing on your values, not just your valuables. Ritual. I just want to say this about ritual, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So the two cornerstones of ritual, any kind of ritual, whether it's a wedding or a funeral or whatever, are that they celebrate life's transitions, and human ritual enables the heart to celebrate or to mourn or to somehow address life's deepest moments. The ritual brings in the past, lives with the future, and sets us on our way, especially a funeral. Especially a funeral. We need to step into loss. And depending on what the loss is, one of the things I've been doing every year is a retreat for Why Me. I don't know if you know Why Me. It's in Worcester. It's an organization that was started by a 12, 14-year-old girl who had cancer. Her name was Sherry Shepard. And her family was pretty well off. And she spent a lot of time at UMass as she was dying. And her family would bring in meals from the outside, bring in, laundered pajamas. She had things, and she could see as a kid that she had things that other kids who were in the hospital with cancer didn't have. And she said to her father, "Why me? Why do I have so many things while I'm fighting this that other kids don't have?" So she didn't say, "Why me, poor me?" She said, "Why me, and why am I blessed?" So she started saying to her father, "Can you bring for this kid? Can you bring for that kid?" Right? Now she's got the thing. When she passed away, her dad started an organization called Why Me. And then they built a house because they realized the number of people who actually come to UMass and Worcester for pediatric cancer and don't have a place to stay. So Sherry's house, they named it after Sherry, and Sherry's house is in the Tatnick area in Worcester. Every year they do a retreat for the families, the parents of children who have died of cancer. So, if you think an invitation to talk to the dull men's group is one thing, I go and work with and speak to parents who have all lost a child to cancer. And they legacy write. I walk them through a legacy writing exercise where they could write about their child and a story, even one story. Not like you have to tell the whole thing, but do you remember a holiday that was special? Write about it. Do you remember the first time your child looked at you and you knew they weren't a kid anymore, that now they're thinking like a grown-up? We do remember the big things like the weddings, the day our kids get married and all that. But legacy writing is a legacy writer. When I meet with people, I ask them questions, okay? And then get a really good picture of who the person is. And those are the kind of questions I ask. Do you remember a holiday? And something special happened. And it could be that you cooked the worst meal you've ever cooked in your life, and it was such a flop. I asked someone recently, it was really the family who was doing the legacy letter to their new grandchild, and they said, oh God, yes, had the in-laws over, and the meal was terrible. Right? But that's your legacy. That's your life. Right? Okay, let's open it up for questions. Either pre-planning questions or legacy questions or thoughts, ideas that you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever do video legacies?
Yes. Yes. And there are many, many companies out there doing this. I mean, just go on. But yes, videos, yes.
Yeah. And we have an in-house program that does that, where the family can submit pictures, video clips, and whatnot, and we put that together into what we call a tribute video, which is often played during, whether it's calling hours or in the background for a memorial service. It's just nice to kind of see people's lives as they've lived it. Sometimes people like it to be chronological, so they start with very young, photographs of when they were younger, all the way through children's marriages, anything, all along the way until they reach, an older age, and then it's just a lovely, lovely tribute. But we do offer that as a service. I think I don't even know the cost. I think it's $150 or something, but the family will get copies of that as well. It's a nice thing to do. Yeah.
I'm curious about cremation versus, traditional service, with the casket and everything. Are a lot of people choosing cremation because of cost, or, is it, a belief, I'm kind of like one of these people that, like, I don't want to be burned, okay?
Yep. That's a great question, and that choice is only something you can make. It's very personal. Like you said, some people just don't like the idea of cremation itself, while others don't like the idea of taking up space in the earth. So it's a personal decision. Cremation does tend to be less expensive, but what a lot of people don't realize is you can have a combination of the two. You can actually have a traditional calling hours, or a wake, some people call it, with your physical body in a casket. You can have your body in church or at the funeral home for the service. Then the cremation takes place, and after that, the family can either take the cremated remains, they can be buried in a cemetery, they can be scattered, whatever, but there can be that combination as well, because we do find that a lot of people need that that almost ritual of the wake in order for them to achieve the closure that they need. So,
I thought it was against the law to scatter ashes.
So you don't want to go to the top of Mount Wachusett and throw your ashes all around. So there are certain places that you are not supposed, you can't put them in the reservoir. Certain places where you're just logically not supposed to put your ashes. But ashes are actually typically rendered harmless to the environment. So if you have a special place or special places that you visited, as long as it's not like a public event, like my husband,
Quietly.
yes, do it quietly, or yes, not during a wind storm, for example, where there's a crowd. That's like my mom, for example. She we always went to Truro on the Cape during our summers. Growing up, it was just something we always did, and it was a really important thing for her. So when she's still living, but she said when she passes, she does want to be cremated, and part of her ashes will be scattered on a particular beach that she loved in North Truro. So just special places. Yeah. But no, it's not illegal, but it is, I shouldn't say that. You cannot scatter in the Wachusett Reservoir. You can't. You'll get in trouble for that.
There's a wonderful book, if you like to read novels. It's called The Fabulous Funeral of Annie Freeman. And it was written about 25 or 30 years ago. I read it then, and I just recently reread it again because it was my original plan. I was like, this is what I want to do. She had her ashes. She died of cancer young, and she appointed 5 women to take her ashes to 5 places that were most significant in her life. They didn't know each other. They were all different parts of her life. And in the places she went, one of them would know about it. And like, so they all learned more about her, more about each other. And they did a ritual at each one of the stops. And she paid for the whole thing. So her insurance money was their flight money, their accommodations, everything. She planned the whole thing. So I read this book like 25 or 30 years ago, and I'm like, that's it, that's what I want. And then now I'm an older woman, and I get like my friends, like the people that I would choose, they're like, they haven't got the energy to go to Haiti and put me there. Because that was one of my places. I'm very devoted to Haiti. And then and one of my friends said, I'm not going to Haiti. No. So like you said, the plans change, right?
Absolutely.
But that idea of special places has always been in human consciousness.
Yep, and I have folks that have planned for cremated remains to be divided among their children.
Yeah.
And whether the children keep them at home or take them to a special place that is important to the child and remembering the parent. It's, it's just a nice option.
Yeah.
So when you go to a funeral and you're at the cemetery and they have the ashes
Yeah.
in the little box,
Yeah.
are the ashes really in there?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you take them back and do whatever the family wanted to do with them?
No, we typically take it, so if we know, if the family tells us ahead of time that they want, some of the ashes divided or whatever, we take those out before we go to the cemetery. If part of the ashes are being buried in a plot, the reserved cremated remains have been taken out prior to that. So because part of that ritual at the cemetery is actually watching the urn be buried in the ground. So we're not going to take it out and take
So
the ashes
some
out.
people do bury it at the plot?
yeah.
Lots of people. And if there's a family plot and there's a full casket burial below, most cemeteries allow for cremated remains to be buried above a casket. So it does open up some possibilities there to go in a family plot. So yeah.
Like up in Paxton at the memorial
Yeah.
park up there?
Yeah, Worcester County,
My
yeah.
mother has a plot up there and there's like one empty plot up
Yeah,
there. So
yeah.
like there's people in my family that, could utilize that.
Right.
So like there could be like 3 people that might be cremated. So would the cemetery allow?
That has to be documented ahead of time with the cemetery by the individual who either purchased the plot or who is the heir to that plot. That has to be documented at a cemetery. So if, for example, an individual is buried and she has 3 children, either she, before she passed, has to go to the cemetery and say, okay, these children can go in this plot, or the heirs to that, which would be the children, have to put that in place.
Because I have the paperwork, so I should go up there and talk to them.
Make an appointment first. Yeah, Worcester County Memorial Park requires an appointment, just so you know. But definitely do that. And you'll
Right,
talk to
that's
Brian or
interesting.
Scott up there.
That's
They're wonderful.
interesting because, I have a sister and her daughter that could possibly,
Yep.
need
absolutely.
a place to go.
Yep, yep. And same thing in the Sterling cemeteries. They do allow for cremated remains to be buried above a casket or, in an adjacent plot. We do that, so. And if there's anybody that has a question that doesn't, or you think about it later, you don't ask it right now, feel free to call me. My card is on the table over there, those pamphlets, please take one. I'm happy to answer questions over the phone, there's no obligation. You can do it by email if you feel more comfortable. My email address is on the card, so.
And if
Is there a limit to how many cremations can go in a lot?
It's cemetery by cemetery.
Okay.
Yeah. Worcester County Memorial Park, I believe, allows 2 cremated remains in one single plot above a casket, where other cemeteries will allow up to 3 or 4. And there are special circumstances. I had a husband and wife who had a disabled daughter, and they had only one plot, one single plot, but all 3 were being cremated. That cemetery only allowed for 2 cremated remains to go in that lot, but because they had a disabled daughter, they made that exception to have her go with them. So, yeah.
And then I just want to say, if there's interest in people looking at like the legacy pieces, I would run a group if there was enough people who wanted to like figure out starting to write a legacy piece, I'd come here and do a group if there was enough. Okay?